Today our focus is on clearing equations of fractions. So, a couple of steps on how to clear fractions. First, find the lowest common denominator for all of the fractions. Second, multiply each term by this LCD. This is going to be very similar to how we cleared decimals yesterday because we multiplied each term by a common multiple of 10, but today we have to determine what that common multiple is. So we're using the lowest common denominator because the only thing that will cancel out denominators is a numerator that has a common value or a common multiple of that value. That will make more sense when we see it in action, so just give me a second here. Then solve the equation. So let's see this in action. State the lowest common denominator to which you can multiply the equation in order to clear the fraction. So notice the fraction. I have 2/3 x minus 1/2. So we're looking for what is our common denominator. Now, you use common denominators all the time when you're adding fractions. So if I took the variable out of this equation, how would you add 2/3 plus negative 1/2? You would say, oh, they have a common denominator of 6. Yes, 6 is the common denominator. Let's get through a couple examples of just finding the common denominator, and then I'll show you how to use it. Next, 2/5 minus 1/15 equals 2/3. So what is our common denominator? Is it 5? No. 15? Well, 5 goes into 15. 3 goes into 15. 15 also goes into 15, so it must be 15. Third, 13 over 2 plus 4 times 3/8x plus 1/3. Now, we want to remember back to our steps for solving equations. Anytime we have something in parentheses, we want to simplify that step first. Otherwise, we're going to get into a mess on our solution. So, we would definitely simplify that portion first. But remember, if I have a 4 in front of my parentheses, that's 4 over 1. So the 4 is really only going to impact the numerators in the two fractions inside the parentheses. It will have no impact on the denominators. So we can still look at all of our values for the denominators to figure out what our common denominator will be. 2, 8, and 3. Well, 2 would go into 8, and 8 goes into 8, but 3 doesn't go into 8. So really we need an even common denominator that satisfies 8 and 3. Well, 8 times 3 is 24. And 24 is an even number, so that would be a common denominator for all three terms. Now, we want to clear the equation of fractions, but we're not quite ready to solve. So we have 3/5 x minus 5/8 equals 7 over 20. And what is our common denominator? Well, the common denominator would definitely be 40. So we're going to multiply the entire equation by 40. Now, there's a long way of doing this, and there's a short way of doing this. I'm going to show you the long way first. 40 times 3 would be a 120 over 5x minus 40 times 5 is 200 over 8 is equal to 40 times 7 is 280 over 20. Now, obviously, the reason why we chose 40 as our common denominator is because each of these are going to simplify. So 120 over 5 simplifies to 24x minus 200 over 8 simplifies to 25 equals 280 divided by 20, 14. Now, I don't know about you, but 24x minus 25 equals 14 looks a lot simpler to solve than what we originally started with. Now, let's do this option 2. Option 2. Since the 40 we said was our LCD, and it's a multiple of the denominator for each one of these values, we can cross-simplify. And so that works by saying 40 divided by 5, because we're going to simplify 40 and 5, is 8, and then we multiply 8 times 3 to get 24. Let's go to our next term, where we will now say 40 divided by its denominator, 8, is 5 times 5, the numerator, would give me 25. Let's go to our last term. 40 divided by 20 is 2, times the numerator of 7 would be 14. Now, I don't particularly care which fashion you use. If you want to use option number 1, which was multiply everything out and then simplify, or if you can understand this relationship between the LCD and the denominator so that you can cross-simplify prior to multiplying each term, that is certainly an option as well. And I think that this is the faster option once you get good at it. Let's look at another example. So we have 5 over 12x minus 1/4 minus 6 equals 5/8. Now, the biggest mistake that happens in this problem every year is that a student will look at this problem and say, 6 is already a whole number. I don't need to clear anything out of its denominator. Now, it is true that 6 is a whole number, but remember, 6 is still a fraction, just like every other term is a fraction. And so when we multiply every term by our LCD, we are also multiplying that term 6 over 1 by whatever our least common denominator is. So we're going to look at our terms. We have 12, 4, 1, and 8. What is our lowest common denominator? Well, 4, 8, and 1, you'd say 8, but that won't help us with 12. 8 doesn't go into 12, but it does go into 24. Every other term would go into 24. So my lowest common denominator would be 24. Now, I'm going to walk through step 2, or option 2, how to solve by cross-simplifying. If you need to multiply every term out and simplify, do so. But I want to model again the cross-simplifying process. So we have 24 divided by 12, which is 2, times 5. 2 times 5 is 10. Again, we have 24 divided by 4, which is 6, times 1, which would remain 6. Again, we have 24 divided by 1, which is still 24, times 6 is going to be 144. All of this will equal 24 divided by 8, which is 3, times 5, which is 15. And notice we have a nice, pretty equation that we could solve very quickly. Now, clear the equation of the fractions, then solve. So we have 1/2 x minus 3/8 equals 17/8. And we have an even number, so we can see very clearly that 8 is going to be our least common denominator. So we're going to multiply the entire equation by 8. So again, 8 divided by 2 is 4, times 1 is 4. 8 divided by 8 is 1, times 3 is 3. 8 divided by 8 is 1, times 17 is 17. So we have a two-step equation. 4x minus 3 is equal to 17, where we'll now start to use, not PEMDAS, SADMAP. So we're looking for subtraction. Yes, I have subtraction that needs to be undone, so I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Let's see, subtraction, addition, division. Nope, there's multiplication in the problem. Yes, so I want to undo the multiplication. We undo multiplication by dividing. So 4/4 simplifies out, and that leaves me with x equals 20 divided by 4, which is 5. So we have a solution of x equals 5. Yes, you can certainly check your solutions by plugging them back into the original equation. And that is our process for clearing fractions.